On today's episode of the Brain Health Kitchen podcast.
So finding out in your early 20s you have the ApoE4 gene, which is a gene variant that increases risk of late-onset Alzheimer's disease, is something that's just really hard to wrap my brain around because most people don't check that early in life.
The understanding of the 2 to 3x risk factor was very visceral for me. And yeah, again, I'm very numbers driven, and I could understand the chances are that someone in my family is likely to get this disease at some point. We've built a system that does 3 things. So the first thing is around diagnostics. So making it very easy to do blood biomarker testing, cognitive testing, genetic testing. Part 2 is AI plus human coaching to make sense of that data and make it really easy to get a personalized plan. And then part 3 is, okay, how do we make it really, really easy to act on that plan? Because that's often the most important part. We have found that dietitians have actually been a really, really good fit for what we do. And in large part because dietitians have a lot of training around behavior change. And at the end of the day, if you think about brain health and the things that you need to do, it's almost all around behavior change.
I am grateful to have 2 of the most trusted brands in brain health as founding sponsors of this podcast. First, we are proudly supported by NeuroReserve, a brain health nutrition company dedicated to bringing us high-quality, science-backed supplements, including Relevate, a brain-specific blend of omega-3 fatty acids, and Revanta, a pure-grade creatine. In fact, if I had to personally choose just 2 brain health supplements to take, it would be Relevate and Revanta. Learn more about their commitment to brain health at neuroreserve.com and use code BHKPodcast for 10% off. We are also proudly supported by BetterBrain, the world's first brain health and dementia prevention program that's covered by insurance. They provide a brain health panel of over 50 markers, expert coaching, and a personalized action plan. Most people pay nothing out of pocket. Check it out at betterbrain.com/Annie. Welcome back to the Brain Health Kitchen podcast. Today, I'm joined by Cédric Gousseau, co-founder of BetterBrain, one of our founding sponsors.
This conversation is about a question we hear all the time. I care about my brain health, but where should I actually start?
Exactly. People are told to be proactive, especially if they have a family history of Alzheimer's or dementia, but the healthcare system is not always set up to help them before symptoms begin. It can be hard to know which tests matter, what your numbers mean, or what to do with the information once you have it.
Cédric came to this work personally after learning unexpectedly and in his early 20s that he carries an ApoE4 gene variant, which increases the risk for late-onset Alzheimer's disease. That discovery sent him deep into the science of dementia prevention.
We talk about the promise and complexity of knowing your genetic risk, why ApoE4 testing is such a personal decision, and what people may choose to do differently if they know they carry the gene.
We also get into some of the markers that don't always show up in a standard doctor's visit, but may matter for brain health. Things like homocysteine, ApoB, Lp(a), B12, folate, inflammation, and newer tests like p-tau 217.
And we talk about why testing alone is not enough, because once you have the information, the real question becomes, how do you turn it into a plan? How do you make changes in sleep, nutrition, movement, stress, supplements, or follow-up care in a way that actually fits into your life?
We also get into the future of brain health prevention. Preventive cardiology has changed how we think about heart disease. Cédric makes the case that brain health needs the same shift. Earlier testing, better interpretation, and more support before people are already in crisis.
So whether you're curious about your own risk, confused by all the new testing, or just wondering what proactive brain care might look like, this conversation will help you understand the emerging landscape of dementia prevention.
And why the future of brain health may be much more personal and practical and actionable than many of us were taught to expect.
Here's my conversation with Cédric Gousseau. Cédric, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Annie. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
You are coming in from New York, is that correct?
Indeed. Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, fantastic. Oh my gosh, I used to live in Brooklyn.
This is probably too early to announce, but we're potentially going to move to the West Coast soon. So enjoying the last bits of the summer here, the early spring.
Oh, exciting. I can't wait to hear what is happening at BetterBrain. And, I wanted to have you on the podcast because I'm so fascinated by how you came up with this idea for an online brain health checkup and a whole system that supports people in their brain health journey. And I just want to talk more about like how you built it, how it's going, and where you see the future lies as well.
Sounds great. And just for listeners' context, I mean, you were one of our very first clients. So you're probably within one of the first 50 clients that we had on board. So it's very cool to be talking about this now, a couple of years later. I think at the time, I believe I was your coach personally, and so we've come a
Yes.
long way since then, and it's been fun
Yes.
to be in touch since then.
Yeah, I should have introduced you as my brain health coach. I didn't realize I was one of the first 50 clients. Well, when I first heard about the concept, I can't remember how you reached out to me or I reached out to you. I was actually fascinated. And it's like, this is what people need because I'm constantly talking to people who want to evaluate their brain health because they have a family history or because they just want to be proactive, even without risk factors. And it's really difficult to have this conversation at your doctor's visit. It's really difficult to get in to see a neurologist if you're actually having cognitive symptoms. And so there's this wide gap between what people want to be correct for the brain health and what's available.
Indeed, indeed. And I can go through how I got to this, but I came to a similar realization, which is why we're building this.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the beginning. Tell us a little bit more about like what did you study in school? What's your career path been like up until Better Brain? And how did you come up with this idea?
Yes, let's do it. So I'm from Canada originally, from the prairies in Winnipeg. I studied to be an actuary initially, but spent most of my career at McKinsey and Company, the management consulting firm, and worked very much in the traditional healthcare system. So, working with health insurance companies and providers and health systems and health tech. So very, very traditional healthcare background. But in parallel, I became very fascinated with the science of longevity and health span early on, probably a decade or so ago. Very avid self-experimenter. I've tried everything myself. And things kind of shifted about 7 years ago when I did a 23andMe test. And initially, I was actually just looking to understand my heritage better. I'm a quarter Asian, and so I was trying to figure out what my background really was. And then, to my surprise, I found out that I have one copy of ApoE4.
Mm,
And listener of these podcasts are probably familiar with this gene. It puts me at something like a 2 to 3x risk increase for Alzheimer's disease. And very freaky to find out. I was in my early 20s and finding this out early. And of course, since it's genetic, I decided, hey, I should get this for my whole family and figure out our whole situation. And so I got 23andMe for Christmas for my whole family, my parents and my brothers. I have two brothers. And it turned out that we all have this gene. We all have either one or two copies of ApoE4. So we have anywhere between 2 and 12x risk increase. And that was very shocking. I mean, that was one of the most stressful periods of my life where I was finding this out and thinking about the future of our family and our risk. And so I funneled a lot of my passion towards health to figuring out this question of brain health specifically. And specifically, how do I not get dementia? And how do I make sure my family doesn't get dementia? Because that would be terrible. And so
wow.
I
So
spent,
finding out in your early 20s, you have the ApoE4 gene, which is a gene variant that increases risk of late onset Alzheimer's disease, is something that's just really hard to wrap my brain around because most people don't check that early in life. Most people are more in midlife when they're starting to think about reducing dementia risk and it starts to come up. And also with your background, like in numbers, like you had an acute, like understanding, right? Of what this gene variant really means.
indeed, yeah, so that's a great point. So I was also, again, I came from an actuarial background, right? So I'm trained in specifically life insurance, so understanding mortality and its morbidity. And the understanding of the 2 to 3x risk factor was very visceral for me. And yeah, again, I'm very numbers driven and I could understand the chances are that someone in my family is likely to get this disease at some point. And for me, it was, I'm usually when there's a problem that comes up, I just go and attack it full force. And feel like that's what I did, right? There was a lot less resources like there are now. Like this podcast is amazing and gets a lot of information out there. 7 years ago, there was a lot less, and so I had to go and I spent so much time just reading studies, like probably thousands of hours, just like looking at the literature. What do we know? What do we not know? Trying to talk to the world experts on this topic, and talked to many amazing people and learned a lot. And what was fascinating at that time is I found out, hey, there's actually a ton that you can do. And I think that was a lot less common knowledge at that time. I think 7 years ago, even trying to publish a paper that had the words Alzheimer's and prevention in the same sentence, it'd be hard to get that through a journal. And things have changed a lot since then, right? I think there's a lot more acceptance that this is true. Something we now know something like 45 to 70% of cases are preventable, and so we've come a long way.
Yeah, I remember when I first started speaking about Alzheimer's and prevention in the same sentence, it was like circa 2014, 2015. People would look at me like I was like literally one of these quack doctors talking about things that have no scientific basis. But we were just starting to see it in the nutrition literature first, really. Okay, so Cedric, I know you get asked this all the time as a brain health coach, and I do as well from people who are considering checking their ApoE4 status. And so we can't discount the psychological impact of knowing that you might be a carrier of this gene. So how did this actually impact you? How did it make you feel when you found out?
Yeah, well, for me, it's a little bit different because I wasn't looking for this information. I was looking to understand just my broader heritage and found this out. And I didn't really sign up to know. And 23andMe sort of told me. I think for me, it was, especially at the young age, very freaky. It just had me totally distracted. I remember at work and it's a fairly high pressure job, but I was probably spending more time trying to understand this science around this than working. And I was like, hey, this is having a significant impact on me. And so we try to bring that framework to when we have clients and they're asking us, do I want to know? And of course, like the number one question when we talk about genes is like, do I want to know if there's nothing I can do? And the answer to that is simple. It's like, no, that there really are things that you can do, not just, being more aggressive about this stuff, but things that you might do differently knowing that you're in E4 status, right? Like the importance of, sufficient DHA consumption or alcohol being particularly destructive if you're especially double four, and the importance of exercise even more so if you have ApoE. So there's actually things that you might change about your protocol knowing, but it's still super, super personal. So we help people decide whether they want to know or not. And we think in most cases, people do end up wanting to know, and they're happy that they do because they actually find that they have more peace of mind knowing. So there's a lot of fear from just the uncertainty of it. And knowing, even if you are positive, knowing that there's things that you can do on that and you're on the right track gives people peace of mind, but not in all cases. So it's very personal.
Yeah, it's worth having a discussion with a physician or a genetic counselor or a brain health coach because you just don't know how someone will personally react. We do have some objective data on this from the REVEAL trial, the REVEAL
Yep.
trial. And what they found, I think it's really helpful in talking to people who are considering ApoE4 testing. They found that there was some psychological distress initially. Almost everyone got over it within a few months, and almost everyone channeled that into better brain health habits that could really move the needle on whether they actually get dementia or not. So
Yes.
but everyone's different, and this is definitely a conversation that needs to happen in anyone who's considering it.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember, did you get your ApoE status? And if so, what made you decide to do that?
I did. My story is so similar to yours, but I'm hearing you talk about getting it through 23andMe, which I was most interested in looking at my ethnic heritage. All of my relatives on my dad's side are from Sicily, as far as I know, right? All of my moms are from Scotland. So I was just curious about that because Sicily is such a melting pot. And I was wondering what else is in there. And my maiden name is probably Spanish origin, which makes sense. The Spaniards conquered Sicily. So I was looking at it from that point of view. And I did get my ApoE4 status. I was, I don't have an ApoE4. I'm a 2 and a 3.
Oh, wow. Okay. You're
Which
lucky
I
then.
didn't
Wow.
even understand the significance of that when I did 23andMe, but now I'm like, very happy of it because 3 is neutral, 2 might be slightly protective. So, it was a good thing. But I also bought it for my brothers and everyone in my family for Christmas. Yeah, I bought them a 23andMe, and so it's more like from the ethnic heritage perspective, and I don't think any of us came up with a 4. So, yeah, dodged that bullet. But, there's always this argument, should you check for ApoE4 or should you just do all the things that are recommended? And I think you hit on a couple things that are very key that people may do differently if they know they have a 4. And number 1 is being super cautious about drinking alcohol because people who are carriers, even just 1 copy, tend to be acutely vulnerable to the detrimental effects of alcohol in the brain. So that's one. And another recommendation is that we know that ApoE4, one of the nature of the gene is that there's a difficulty getting omega-3 fatty acids to the brain. And so one way to override that is to increase, specifically one of the brain-specific DHAs. So your omega-3 dose might be different. You might decide to take a supplement instead of just eating fish. The exercise piece is really important. I mean, you tell me, but from what I understand, the ApoE4s are just a little bit more vulnerable to all the things that can be bad for brain health.
Indeed, indeed. So it's partially those tweaks on those few things you mentioned. Those are the main ones. But then just some people just find it very motivating to say, "Hey, I'm going to. I know sleep is good for me, but I'm going to really prioritize it because bad sleep is particularly bad for ApoE4 carriers."
Yeah, and on the flip side, what the studies are showing, at least my interpretation is that anything you can do that's beneficial for brain health, like getting adequate sleep, actually helps ApoE4s maybe even more than the average person. So there's like an upside where the positive activities, the positive brain health things you can do are more meaningful and more helpful for an ApoE4 carrier.
Indeed. That's all on the positive side, right? Reasons to know. I think it's also important to frame for people, especially our clients, like why would you not want to get it? And I think there are some people who just psychologically feel like they would not be able to handle the news well. And I think that is a real consideration to think through in deciding whether or not to go through with the testing.
Yeah. So you found out you were a carrier. You went down a rabbit hole. You're like looking up scientific studies while you're at work, suppose doing something else. When did you decide to change careers or, what happened next?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the next thing I did is to try to find care for myself and my family, right? Like where I was reading all this stuff online theoretically, but how do I actually do testing and find the right interventions for myself? And that led me to go to various physicians. I went to my primary care physician and asked what I could do, and didn't get a ton there. I think the training there that you get in medical school, it doesn't focus much or at all on topics like dementia prevention, right? And then there's just the time aspect. They're very busy professional, and the system is already working against them. So it didn't find as much there. I went to a dementia prevention clinic, which there are some, right? So which was very cool to see. There's a number of clinics in the U.S. that are in person, and went through one, and it was fantastic. The science was really, really strong, and I got a lot out of it. The issue for me as I went through was, one, it was thousands of dollars out of pocket, so insurance wasn't covering this, and I was on the wait list for almost 2 years before going through it. And
Really?
yeah, and so you're waiting there for 2 years, a little bit anxious to find out, and but finally got in. It's an in-person experience, and again, I thought it was great, but the question was, if this is thousands of dollars, only, maybe tens of thousands of people will be willing to pay that in the US, but there's tens of millions of people that are looking for this sort of care. And so now, in fact, there's actually a $100,000 dementia prevention clinic in New York that opened recently. And
Really? So they're charging $100,000.
$100,000, and I found this out recently. And again, if you're one of the thousands of people in the world that can afford that, that's fantastic. But so I became really fascinated with this idea of how do we take that science, but make it accessible to a broad swath of people. And been thinking about this for a very long time. I then met my now co-founder, who started the McKinsey Health Institute at McKinsey, and was a prominent consultant there, and his mother-in-law had just passed away. And so he had a similar idea around this. And so we decided now about almost 3 years ago to quit our jobs and just do this full time and try to get this out to as many people as possible.
We should probably add that ApoE4 carrier status is really common in the US, right? I mean, I see data that says maybe 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people have at least one copy of the ApoE4. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 1 in 4 is the most common statistic you hear there, and then something like 2 or 3% might have 2 copies of the gene. And so it's many, if you do the math, it's like it's many, many tens of millions of people. And again, we should emphasize it's a risk factor, it's non-deterministic, it increases your risk. And if you don't have the gene as well, you can still get Alzheimer's disease. It's just a lower risk. So everyone's at risk. There's different levels of risk.
Exactly, exactly. And I wonder how many people in the US know their carrier status. The last time I looked at this was years ago, like probably 10 years ago, and it was something like 1 in 25. I think that was based on 23andMe data. I wonder if that's increased at all.
I think, yeah, what we've seen is it was something like, I don't know, 10 or 15 or 20 million, somewhere in that range that have done some sort of genetic testing. And but the issue is, even if you do the testing, like what percentage of those 20 million people actually dug in enough to see their ApoE4 status and understand what it means? It's probably very, very low.
Oh, yeah, that's such a good point because a lot of people don't even look closely at their 23andMe data. And I don't know, I downloaded my data and then deleted my account there. So a lot of
Same.
people maybe just don't even have it anymore. Maybe they never downloaded it. And so also, when I was talking to Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who's a neuroscientist at Weill Cornell about ApoE4 testing, she told me that there were a lot of errors in 23andMe as well, that she had seen some. So she always recommends that people retest through a CLIA certified lab if they indeed had a positive test on 20.
Yes, yes, indeed, indeed.
Yeah, so getting a reputable lab is important. And that's something that BetterBrain offers now, right? If somebody wants to get tested for ApoE4, they can add that to their blood work.
They can, and it's an add-on. So we try to not, again, it's a personal decision. So we try to help people think through whether it makes sense for them.
So you launched BetterBrain, and your goal is to bring information to people who want to explore their brain health, or how would you describe the overriding goal when you first started?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, like, I spent, as I said, hundreds, maybe thousands of hours trying to figure this out myself, trying to figure out what blood test should I be getting and how do I interpret that? What are the ones that matter the most? And how do I get genetics and how do I get insurance to cover this stuff? And which cognitive testing should I take? And it just took many, many hours. And so the goal was, how do we make that, everything I did manually, as easy as possible for people and for as little money as possible? And so the way to describe it now is there's kind of 3 buckets of things that we do. We've built a system that does 3 things. So the first thing is around diagnostics. So making it very easy to do blood biomarker testing, cognitive testing, genetic testing. We'll integrate with your wearable data in real time, pulling your medical records if that is helpful. And so we get a very, very deep picture of your brain health and just your overall health. Part 2 is AI plus human coaching to make sense of that data and make it really easy to get a personalized plan. And then part 3 is, okay, how do we make it really, really easy to act on that plan? Because that's often the most important part. And so, whether that's ongoing coaching or that is, connecting you with the right clinical trial or referral to a specialist or curated products and services. And so those are the 3 buckets of things that we do. And we built a system to make it really easy to do those things.
Yeah, the action piece is really key because, people will go and get these really expensive blood panels, and yours is super affordable for, especially considering what you get with, specific brain health biomarkers you don't get elsewhere. But people tend to be really good about getting tested, but then the follow-up is lacking. Number one, they may not have a healthcare provider who's willing to go into depth on what all this data means. Even ApoE4, a lot of general practitioners wouldn't know really how to counsel someone about that. It's sort of a niche area. Um, and then, what are the action items? Like, what do you do? And how do you follow up? And what happens next? So I love that it's not just like a one-time checkup, but it's a system that, follows you, you know, as long as you wanna be followed, really, right?
Yeah, and then this was a recent evolution for us as we learned what you said later in the game, right? So initially, actually, when you joined, whatever it might have been 2 years ago or so, it was more of a one-time checkup experience. So you did blood biomarker testing, you did a coaching session, and you got a plan, and then off you go. And what we found is that people really value that, but not everyone would follow through on the plan. And so since you did it, it's evolved quite a bit, and we can go through that. But like, it's now one of our flagship offerings. For example, is a 90-day program where it's like, okay, rather than just a one-time thing, let's go really, really deep over many sessions. And I think that's been probably one of the biggest unlocks in actually getting to real outcomes for people is that ongoing thing. So if you join now, it's basically you can do up to weekly sessions with a coach, a trained preventive neurology expert coach, and we go very, very deep. So at the beginning, you do all of the diagnostics to understand your baseline and where you are, and then the first few sessions are around interpreting that and coming up with a plan that makes sense for that person. And then beyond, but then the other 6 to 8 sessions after that, it's all around behavior change, because that's really what matters. And so we'll go deep on areas that the clients are interested in. If sleep is one of the biggest issues that they think about, let's spend a whole hour on sleep. Let's really tweak every aspect of sleep and understand what the pain points are, and then use things like motivational interviewing techniques to have people take action, and then after 90 days, doing another round of testing to understand if we've actually moved the needle and tweaking things as needed. And I think that was the big unlock for us, is that when people see their biomarkers improving, which they do in the vast majority of the time, but they also feel better and feel like their brain is working better, it's a very powerful motivator to keep going. So
Mhm.
I think that's the difference when you did it 2 years ago and where we are now.
Yeah, and, I'm kind of a good example. I'm a super motivated client, right? But I'm also really busy, and so, like, if you hadn't been sending me email reminders that I was supposed to get my blood work rechecked, I might not have done it, and even so, it took me 6 months to get my follow-up blood work done just because I'm busy, and so I can totally relate to people who just really need to be part of a system that's checking on them and making sure they follow up, and as you start to get into the system, it feels really good to have someone look at your brain health more than just once a year or just once. So I wanted to back up a little bit and ask you about when you started the company, which medical advisors did you reach out to? I know you have a board of advisors, right?
We do, yeah, and this is super important for us because, full disclosure, I'm not an MD, I'm not a clinician of any sort, even though I was your coach, and so we are very, very hardcore about the science and ensuring everything's evidence-based. And so we've assembled a pretty all-star set of clinical advisors, led by Dr. Tommy Wood, who I know was on this podcast,
Oh, yeah,
and
Tommy.
highly recommend folks listen to that episode, which is great. He also had a book that came out about a week ago, which is fantastic. But Dr. Tommy Wood's our chief science officer. He MD, PhD, who's now very focused around this question of dementia prevention. And we also, beyond that, we've tried to assemble experts in different areas of brain health, because brain health's not one thing. If anyone's listening to this podcast that already knows, there's so many dimensions of health that you need to think about. And so we'll have a PhD expert in social connection, because we know that that's a critical component. We have an orthopedic surgeon, because we know that movement is critical. And so how do we ensure that people can continue to move into old age? And so we have, yeah, just a mix of MDs and PhDs across these areas.
Oh, that's fantastic. I know that they're keeping a close eye on the science as it changes, because this is a rapidly evolving area in the scientific literature. New studies are coming out every day, every week, that can sometimes change practice. And it's really
Right.
difficult for one person to stay on top of it all.
Indeed, indeed.
And then you have also have a team of brain health coaches, and I know a couple of them. I know Barbie Bowles, she also has been a guest
Yeah.
on the podcast, and she's a good friend of mine. She is also known as the cognition dietitian. She's one of the most knowledgeable people I know about cardio and metabolic risk, especially in midlife women. and dementia prevention. But in terms of your brain health coaches, like, are they nurses, nurse practitioners, doctors? How do you train them? How do you get them up to speed on the brain health science?
Yeah, so boy, this is one that we've thought so much about because at the end of the day, it's so important. Like who is the coach is maybe the most critical factor, and so we've experimented with a lot of different type of dietitians. So we have we've worked with MDs and nurses and nurse practitioners and dietitians, and across the different disciplines, we have found that dietitians are actually been a really really good fit for what we do, and in large part because dietitians have a lot of training around behavior change. And at the end of the day, if you think about brain health and the things that you need to do, it's almost all around behavior change. And their training around motivational interviewing and moving people to action has been really, really critical. And so what we are trying to find is the dietitians that are really on top of the science, not just diet, but understand exercise and sleep and stress management and supplements and interpreting blood work, which are far and few between. But when you find them, they're really, really extraordinary. And so we're trying to find all the ones that exist in the U.S. and we have a system to try to do that. But we hold a really, really high bar around quality, and we have found some amazing dietitians, including Barbie.
Yeah. So when a client is assigned to a coach or chooses a coach, do they work with the same person through their program, or do they bounce around, get different ideas?
Yes, yeah, it's always the same person. We think that's really important. We've seen in some cases we'd have to switch people, switch coaches, and people don't like that. They build this relationship with someone that they speak with, every couple of weeks, and it's hard when you switch the coach. So we're very intentional about that.
Okay, so walk me through what it's like to join up for BetterBrain. I know when I did it, I just jumped on it because this was something I wanted for myself, for my own brain health evaluation. I also wanted to see what it was like for my subscribers on Brain Health Kitchen, to tell them what it was like, or all the people that I meet out in the world who ask me about what to do about their brain health. So I was doing it both as like a client and also, a researcher. But walk me through what it's like to land on your website and what happens next.
Sure. I mean, so again, we have various different offerings because we're trying to meet people where they are, right? You're saying you're obviously a very busy professional. We have an offering that is like that, where you have diagnostics and you have one coaching session, one deep coaching session to come up with a plan, and that's one that in total it could take 2 hours of your time, 2 hours of your time, and you've got this plan. I think the other version is the longer 90-day program that I mentioned. But the first step is to see if insurance covers you. And this is one thing that we've been working on this for a very long time. I think when we first launched this was a cash pay offering out of pocket, and so clients were paying us $400 to $600 for the program, and we spent a lot of time figuring out, okay, how do we make it as close to $0 as possible? Because to get to the scale that we want, which is tens of millions of people, it has to be free, or as close to free as possible. And so first step is see if your insurance covers it. And we have a quick eligibility checker to see if it does. And if it does, the vast majority of people pay $0 out of pocket for the coaching. Um, and so once you find that out, you can decide whether you want the more rapid version of it versus the 90-day program versus the free offering that we have. And yeah, and then beyond that, I mean, I sort of described the 90-day program. I think the one thing to emphasize is we have found that people come to us because they're worried about dementia. Their parent had Alzheimer's disease. Their grandparents had dementia, and they don't want to get it themselves. But what's been interesting to see is that the reason people stay is not for that. Human psychology is never wired to wanting to prevent something that's 20 or 30 years down the line. It's just not, people are worried about what's happening tomorrow or even today. And so they come to us because they're worried about dementia, but then as they go through the program, we found that they stay because they actually feel better. Like their brain is working better. They feel their well-being has improved because, of course, like when you sleep better and exercise better and all these things, you just naturally will feel better. And so that's what we're most excited about now.
I love that. So maybe a concern about future dementia is the hook, but the thing that keeps people staying is the program actually works to make you feel better. And, of course, I've had the same experience in Brain Health Kitchen and all my work over the years that once people, for me, the dietary pattern is sort of like the in. Once people start eating a brain healthy diet, it spills over into the rest of their life. They want to have harder workouts. They want to optimize their sleep. They want to look at their supplement routine and make sure it's optimized as well. So it's great to hear that because, all this brain health stuff we talk about, it's about dementia prevention, but it's also about, like having a really thriving brain right now. I mean, that's how I explain it to college students. They don't care if they may be getting Alzheimer's in like 50 years. That's just not really on their radar. But they wanna kill it at work, they want to get good grades, they wanna get a great job, all of those things, and they wanna feel like their brain is just, working on all cylinders. So, it's so good to hear that you have that feedback.
Yeah, and it should have been obvious because honestly, if I reflect on myself, like why do I'm pretty optimized around exercise and sleep and nutrition, all that stuff. And if I really introspect and think about why am I doing this, part of it is dementia prevention for sure, but a lot of it is, I'm trying to build this company. I'm working 80 plus hours a week. Like I need to be sharp. I need to be on my game. And so that's a huge motive for me. I don't know about you. I don't know what keeps you going because you do a lot of the stuff as well. Um,
Yeah,
nutrition and
I
mental stuff.
wanted to talk to you about your brain health, like, life. And I was thinking about how, how difficult it is to start up a company and then get it out there and then make it a success and all the hours that it takes. And it requires being online a lot. And it also requires sitting a lot.
Hmm.
How do we reconcile that with all the things that we're telling people to do for brain health? And it's always a balancing issue. It's always a balancing issue. And sometimes I have to just get up from my computer and walk away for the rest of the day and say like, "Okay, I've worked enough today. I actually need to go out and, go to the gym or go for a long walk or like do the things that I know I need to do for my brain health." I find that optimizing sleep is probably one of the most important things because, if you're trying to steal those hours at night to get work done, it just doesn't work out very well. It just doesn't because I'm not as productive during the day if I haven't had, sufficient good quality sleep. You find that as well?
I do, but I'm a little bit unique in that I actually find some of my most productive hours are 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. And
Really? You're a night
so
owl.
I care a ton about sleep, and yeah, I do all the things that I need to be doing to try to get as good sleep as possible. But I do find that period for me is super productive. So that's unfortunately probably does impact my sleep. But those are
No,
the
I
trade-offs.
thi
It's
I
like
think
we're
that, like,
both,
if you
yeah.
know your chronotype, there's something to that. There is some science to say that we all have different chronotypes, and they change as you get older. Like, I used to be more of a night owl, and now I'm definitely more of an early bird. Going to medical school definitely cures you of that chronotype because you have to be at work at, like, 5 AM. Um, but, yeah, I mean, optimizing when your brain is, like, be functioning best. Okay, so let's get back to so let's say I sign up and I choose what program I wanna go on, and then I choose there's a battery of biomarkers, laboratory tests, and then there's some add-ons that I can just opt in or opt out. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So the add-ons and are there's ApoE testing, which you can decide whether you want to know your genetic risk, and then this other marker that some of your listeners might be familiar with called p-tau217, which is another very hot topic these days, and whole other set of pros and cons on whether you want to test for that. But we give
Yeah.
the option to people there as
Yeah,
well.
let's talk about p-tau. It's fascinating, and I think most people have learned or read somewhere that there's a blood test for Alzheimer's disease, and it's evolved over the last couple years when these large studies came out about whether they're predictive or not. So where does,
Yep.
p-tau2 now?
I mean, the first thing to say is it's very, very early, right? These tests are very, very new. There's a lot more science that needs to be done to understand these tests thoroughly. But we think it's a very interesting data point to add to the constellation of other data points that we test for. There's just for listeners, like what's the way to think about this is whereas ApoE is a measure of your genetic risk, p-tau is one of many markers that tries to understand the current level of amyloid pathology in your brain right now. And as I say this, you're probably, if you're feeling a bit squeamish, like that's you're not alone. I think many people are very worried about finding out, hey, I've got active pathology in the brain. Very, very scared to find out. And so again, maybe even more so than ApoE, I think it's a very, very personal decision, and you need to understand the pros and cons of whether it makes sense for you. But we have found that for certain people in certain cases, it's a really, really helpful tool, both for risk stratification, so understanding, should you be even more aggressive around brain health practices, but also for tracking over time. And again, this is where the science is early, right? But we think that all else equal, if you're seeing a p-tau go down dramatically, which we see in some cases with some of our clients, it's one signal that you're moving in the right direction. And then, of course, if it's high, then maybe it makes sense to do a more thorough workup with a neurologist and see whether it's treatments that are available or other things. But it's another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, and it's poorly misunderstood by a lot of healthcare providers, is my understanding. And I think there's maybe a misconception amongst people, at least the ones I talk to sometimes, that like if you have amyloid or tau in the brain, it's there. It's like glue, right? It's not going anywhere. You are, you're doomed. It's like dementia in evolution. But I think what we're learning from some of the recent studies in the last couple years is that amyloid and tau is the two proteins that are associated with Alzheimer's. They actually are a little bit in flux. Like you can flush it out at night through your lymphatic system in the brain. And that's why we keep talking about sleep. It's so important to get adequate activation of the lymphatic system so that we are releasing toxins into the bloodstream and then excreting them. And also, lifestyle intervention trials have shown that we can actually see p-tau go down in someone where it was, a little bit elevated. So it's a lot more fluid, I think, than maybe people realize. So I think that's why getting tested for p-tau seems scary. It seems like, oh my God, it's positive. I have amyloid in my brain. But we all have amyloid in our brain, starting in our 20s. I mean, we're like the brain aging process throughout the decades is this process of a buildup of these proteins and a flushing out of these proteins. So it's the name of the game is to minimize it, right?
Indeed. I mean, I've got amyloid in my brain. We all, we all do. And we know that that's not the only factor that leads to Alzheimer's. In fact, there's so many now we're learning pathways to Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, but it's an interesting marker, and we're continuing to trying to keep up with the science and continuing to improve our interpretation.
Yeah, and this is rapidly evolving in the literature. So it's like whenever someone asks me about it, I have to go look again to see if another paper was published about it. I know that the biggest controversy lies in checking it in someone who has no symptoms of cognitive decline at all. Like, what do you do with the person who is completely cognitively healthy, no memory or thinking skill lapses, and their tau is high? It's a little bit more clear if someone's exhibiting cognitive symptoms, like subjective cognitive decline or just, like, feeling like they have memory slips, because it might expedite, referral to a neurologist, for example, which can take a long time. Like, it can take a long time to try to get in to see a neurologist. There's so few neurologists. There's only a handful, maybe 2 in the country, actually, that focus on preventive neurology. And so most neurologists aren't even focused on this. They're working so hard to take care of all the people that already have cognitive decline. And so this is another like sort of gap in our healthcare system where BetterBrain is filling in the need, right?
Yeah, I mean, um, we have a lot of thoughts on just the way the healthcare system works now, and I think it is, as we all know. I mean, I'm from Canada, so we have a even more antiquated healthcare system there. But we look up to the U.S. healthcare system and how incredible it is at treatment and end of life care and everything. So we know it's deficient in prevention. This is nothing new to anyone, but we think it's particularly behind on brain health because the science is so new and it takes time to get into the system. But we think like one thing that's totally backwards about the system is the reimbursement and the way that, for one example is like, diagnostics are not covered. Things like p-tau217, other diagnostics, cognitive testing are not covered by the system until you have a diagnosis of, mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's disease. And we think that's totally backwards. It's like, as my co-founder likes to say, it's like saying we're not going to pay for a colonoscopy until you have colon cancer. And so we all understand intuitively that it doesn't make any sense.
Right. Or we're not going to pay for a DEXA scan until you're 65 years old
Right,
for
right.
osteoporosis. And then at that point at which it will be irreversible.
Yep.
Yeah, it's wacky for sure. Okay, so the panel of blood markers that are just included in BetterBrain, give us a rundown of what those.
Yes, I mean, it's a lot of the markers that you might get in a standard physical to start with, and we just help interpret it in the context of brain health. But there's a lot of things that you would not get from a traditional panel. So things like homocysteine, which we know is highly related to your risk of dementia and cognitive function. We'll go deeper on lipids, so doing things like Lp(a) and ApoB, various micronutrients like B12 and folate, and things like ferritin, HSCRP for inflammation, uric acid. So we go pretty deep, and we've basically selected the markers along with our panel of clinical advisors that have the most evidence that they're related to brain health. And then again, you got those potential add-ons.
So it's so interesting. When I did my first blood panel with BetterBrain, of course, I've had blood work over the years, and I had an idea what my cholesterol was, and I'd never had any micronutrient deficiencies, but I'd never checked a homocysteine. It was like the implication with brain health was on my radar, but it was just never made it into my laboratory panel. So when I learned that my homocysteine was a little bit high, you helped me understand the importance of that. I dug into the VitaCog study, and I realized that this is just like a low hanging fruit for people to check in their blood work, and I had never even had it. So let's talk a little bit about homocysteine and what that trial actually showed.
Yeah, so this is one, again, it's a tragedy that it doesn't get tested as a regular panel for people, but it's we've known it's associated with cardiovascular disease risk and now dementia risk for some time. And the VitaCog study was a study saying for individuals that have high homocysteine, particularly around, above something like 13, if you take methylated B vitamins and use that as a mechanism to reduce homocysteine, what does that do to brain atrophy in particular? And what the study showed was that it did indeed, of course, we didn't have hard outcomes on dementia cases, but it did show average reduction in brain atrophy of about 30% and up to 50% in some cases. And so we know, meaning your brain is literally getting smaller, and you're slowing that down by bringing your homocysteine down with B vitamins. So that, yeah, again, it's one of these super low hanging fruits. If you have it, which, it's fairly common to have high homocysteine if you're above the age of 50 or 60, and taking a B vitamin is not a big lift and has a really meaningful impact. So that's part of what we get excited about, is like finding these opportunities for people that are like, quick wins that they can implement right away.
Yeah, and, if someone's not familiar with the relationship between homocysteine and B vitamins, if your B vitamins are deficient because you're not getting them through food, or you're not able to activate your B vitamins because you have a gene variant that doesn't methylate them, then homocysteine is like this backup product, right? It just kinda like it backs up in the brain. It's always been a marker for inflammation, especially for heart health, and thought to be somewhat nonspecific. That's why a lot of doctors don't love these nonspecific markers for inflammation, like, CRP and homocysteine. But here, it's got a specific utility in terms of being a window into that brain health B vitamin relationship. And so, yeah, I learned that I wasn't methylating my B vitamins, and that had never shown up on my labs before. I had been checked for folate before. And so it was just really interesting to me. For me, taking methylated B vitamins once a day is a no-brainer. It's so easy. I only take a couple supplements, and that's one of them that's particular to like my brain health needs. And I'm looking forward to seeing that homocysteine go down because it reduces my risk long term. And some of the other labs, the lipid panel, or like people are used to getting their cholesterol checked, right? And I am continually blown away by how non-aggressive some people's healthcare providers are about elevated lipids, like LDL cholesterol. I was just down in Costa Rica on a brain health retreat, and we were talking about cholesterol a lot. And I told everyone, bring me your lipid panels to breakfast. We're going to talk about this. And everyone had hard copies of their labs because they wanted to talk to me about it at some point during the week. And, I was actually in my consultation practice and just talking to everyone there. It becomes apparent to me that people's LDLs are too high. They're too high above what we know is best for brain health. And so, not just the LDL and the HDL, I really love that BetterBrain was one of the first to add an ApoB, which is more accurate, right, than an LDL, and also an LP little a.
Yeah, we have many strong thoughts on this. I think it's still a little bit controversial, right? But I think, we have the view that lower is better, obviously for cardiovascular disease, but dementia risk as well. And so again, we don't prescribe medications, but we help educate people on the value of lower ApoB. I personally am very aggressive about my ApoB and keeping it very, very low with various pharmacological agents. Not everyone has to be as aggressive as me, but I think there's a lot of value in, first knowing ApoB being a more accurate measure of number of LDL particles and Lp(a), especially because with something like Lp(a), it is harder to change. There's only a couple, one really solid pharmacological agent that can reduce that, which is the PCSK9 inhibitor, which I take. But there are drugs coming out in the pipeline. There's a couple in phase 3 trials, the antisense oligonucleotides, the silencing RNA drugs that are likely to hit the market in coming years. And so we've helped a lot of people understand that, and that they're going to be aware, right? As soon as one of these drugs hit the market, we're going to make them aware that this exists.
Yeah, yeah, there are new drugs coming out for this, and I think that a lot of us who've been reading the literature on ApoB and LP little a, and the importance and having that checked in addition to a lipid panel, we've been following this research for years, but it just showed up in the American Heart Association's updated guidelines like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was part of the Canadian guidelines, correct? The European guidelines. If you talk to a lipidologist, they can cite hundreds of studies that show that, lower LDL is better. ApoB is a better indicator of, risk of basically atherosclerotic heart disease. LP little a is like mandatory. Everyone needs to check that because it can miss a lot of the heart disease that runs in families and people don't even know that they have it. So these things are like, it's very heartening to know that we've been telling people this for years, and now the guidelines are starting to reflect it. And these guidelines are just, conservative. Doctors are conservative. Medical guidelines take a long time to change. But people don't want, people want the up-to-date information, and that's what people deserve. So it's really great
Yes.
that that's part of your protocol.
Yeah, I was so excited to see the guideline change on that. I think again, if I think about our broader vision, we want to get to where cardiovascular disease is now in preventive cardiology with neurology. Right? Like it's amazing that people, there's now recognition of these markers and you know, lowering your lipids as early as 30 years old. How do we get that same mindset in neurology and have people, because we've come so far, these risk factors are really understood. Doctors are prescribing lipid lowering therapy, are talking about things like cholesterol and blood pressure. But how do we change the system now? Brain health is next. How do we enact change there?
Yeah, it's a
So
really
we're
good
not going to stop until
point.
that happens.
Preventive cardiology has come a long way. And, I live in Jackson, Wyoming. We have a 55-bed hospital. And recently I called up the switchboard and said, I want to talk to the preventive cardiologist. And she said, oh, great, I'll put you right through. Like, we actually have a cardiologist where I live, which is a fairly small community, who is focused on preventive cardiology, which I think is just remarkable how far we've come on that. And wouldn't it be amazing if there was a preventive neurologist available to everyone as well? But
Yeah.
a lot of the principles, are the same, right? Like what's good for the heart is good for the brain. That's why we talk about lipids so much. LDL is an independent modifiable risk factor for dementia based on the Lancet Commission. So it's a really important thing to target. A lot of people's LDLs are just, in my opinion, way too high, way too high. So that's one
Yeah.
thing. When you go to BetterBrain, you get the most up-to-date, cutting-edge lipid profile, these micronutrient assays that look at deficiencies that are super common, right? And also homocysteine. And then there's the add-ons for, p-tau2. If you think that would be a good idea, you can talk to the coach about it. ApoE4 to know if you're a genetic carrier. All of these things are like the information people need to move forward and make changes for the better.
Indeed, yeah. We're trying to basically, I mean, like you're talking about preventive cardiologists. We think preventive neurologists would be great. The issue is there's like two in the world. And so how do we try to
Yeah,
work within the
Kellyanne
existing
Niotis is
system?
one. We
Yeah,
had her on the podcast.
she's fantastic.
She's one of my
She's
mentors.
fantastic. And how do we clone her? And it's going to take time for that to percolate through. And so in the meantime, we're like, all right, how do we work within the existence to get this out to as many people more quickly? Because I'm like, my parents are getting older. People, I think every 3 seconds or so, someone gets diagnosed. So like, there's no time to wait for the system to change. And so how do we do this as quickly as possible and work within current constraints?
Right. And there's still only a handful of Alzheimer's prevention clinics in the country, right? That hasn't really changed since your experience. I maybe know 5. I'm saying ballpark 5. I didn't know about the
Yep.
$100,000 one.
Yeah,
That's
no,
news.
that's fairly recent. Yep, yep.
That's news to me.
And I think goes to
Okay.
show just the level of demand and, people are willing to pay this and,
Yeah.
but most people can't afford it.
Yeah. So someone goes in, they get their assessment, they get their labs, they have their coaching session. How do you assess cognitive function on BetterBrain?
Yeah, we work with various, like our general philosophy is to curate the best diagnostics in the different areas. And so we work with different vendors around this that have sort of FDA testing, cognitive testing, and we're working to expand that. But we think what's unique about us is most of our clients are not diagnosed, right? This is all preventive. Most tests are focused around getting people diagnosed with the condition, mild cognitive impairment. What we care the most about is your trend over time. So if you're asymptomatic, you still want to know, is my brain working better or worse over time? And so that's what we're very focused on is we don't really have people focus on your absolute score and more so, does it go up in 6 months? Does it go down in 6 months? And then how do we continue to iterate?
Well, I know one of the barriers for a lot of people to get any kind of brain health checkup is they're afraid of the cognitive test. It's daunting.
Yeah.
They're afraid to there's a lot of anxiety around this testing, which of course can make you, not do well, like a lot of tests. And so I don't
Yes.
know, when I did your cognitive test, it was more about processing speed test, and it was just actually really fun and not scary. And I wouldn't want anyone to, be afraid to do that because it's really a piece of cake. Yeah. And you're mostly just looking at data over time. It's not like a mini mental status. It's not like a MoCA or one of those clock drawing tests that, a neurologist would have you. It's the most important thing is the overall picture and the snapshot of, your brain health, cardiovascular health. Yeah, everything. Okay. So going through the program, one thing that I really loved was so my LDL cholesterol was a little bit higher compared to earlier ones that I had done. Probably just, I don't know, aging. Maybe I spent too much time in Italy eating cheese. I don't know. And so, like, when you go into your dashboard on Better Brain, there's all these articles that you can access that are written for your particular issue, and all these options that you can do, like how do you lower the saturated fat in your diet, which is, one approach to lowering LDL cholesterol. Are there any supplements you can take? What's the deal with berberine? Stuff like that. And so I found that to be really helpful too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we've been surprised. One of the surprising things in building this was, we have this whole dashboard and it's a lot of information, right? Yeah, again, like you said, you got high LDL, you can read these pages around this and click the studies. And I don't know, I personally was never that. I did not think people would spend that much time on it. I thought people would just care about the testing and the coaching. And I've been surprised. Some people spend like, tens of hours just browsing the different tabs. And again, some people have more time and patience than others. A lot of people just don't care at all. But um, there is a number of people who are, will go very, very deep.
Yeah, and just think about the average person who is doing a Google search or going to ChatGPT and trying to search issues about brain health. And so, the whole World Wide Web is at their disposal. It's not curated in any way to be scientifically sound or coming from medical professionals or scientific professionals, right? So here you have like a curated database that's based on science. There's resources. You can actually see what studies there are to back it up. You can look at your scientific advisors, where a lot of this information, kind of probably came from. And so it's like a curated way to look up an issue, a topic, like high homocysteine or low folate or things like that. So I find that like incredibly useful. Like I would love if anyone was researching their brain health topics to land on the BetterBrain site, right? You have to be a member, of course, to search all that. Or like land on my Substack. It's sort of the same thing. It's like a curated collection of information that's based on science. Otherwise, it's kind of the Wild West out there when it comes to brain health.
It is. By the way, have you tried our AI? It's
Yeah,
newer, but
yeah.
have you? Okay,
Yeah, what do you call
because
it? BB?
BB.
Yeah, so I was actually on the dashboard not too long ago, and BB is a way, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my initial impression. BB is a way to search the site and also look up things from my profile. Like I can ask it a question about one of my blood tests, and then it can go into a lot more detail and then find me things on the site that are pertinent.
Yeah, so I mentioned ChatGPT. It's like, if ChatGPT is great, it doesn't know as much context about you and your health. And so what we're trying to do is we have all of this incredible data on your brain health, like deep data, whether it's, again, blood, genetics, medical records, all this stuff. It is a lot, right? And so how do we make it easy to parse that and find the insights? So the AI is like trying to say, okay, if you can ask it a question and it knows all your data, it understands the conversations that you've had with your coach. And that, I think, as the models keep getting better and better, we're investing a lot in making that really good, because I think a lot of this can be done, without a human. A lot of this, the AI is becoming better in some cases than finding insights and connecting the dots in the right way. And so we're very excited about that.
Yeah, it's such a great application of AI to a medical system. I mean, the problem with like AI in general is it's drawing from too many sources, but here you have a curated amount of scientific information, and then you're just searching that and personalizing it. And I don't know, does BB get to know me like ChatGPT does?
It does, yeah. We've got a memory system. We put a lot of thought into this. So it has a memory system. It understands as you converse with it. It remembers what you've asked in the past. It knows every conversation that you've had with your coach in the past, and so it knows a lot, which has been interesting.
Yeah, so like, I probably wouldn't recommend someone go to ChatGPT for their personal health information, but this is like a different thing. This is highly curated and aligned with the program and the views of your medical directors.
Yeah, I think ChatGPT is great. I think it's just the process of uploading your labs or feeding it the right information. So we're just trying to make it slightly easier to use.
Yeah, yeah. So that's
By the way, you
cool.
said yeah, and it's now we made it free for everyone. Whether it's so you mentioned you have to be a member. You don't have to be a member. We
Oh,
have like a part of our mission. We obviously are a company and we need to survive, but we also are deeply mission driven. We are trying to make this. We have a free version that you can access the whole app, all the content, including our AI.
oh
For
my gosh, I didn't know that. I will definitely have to share that information.
yeah, so we certainly like lose money on that, but we just want to get to people quickly.
Yeah, it's clear that BetterBrain is mission driven. When I first heard about what you were doing, number one, I wanted to be a client. Number two, I wanted to have everyone on Substack who I'm in contact with in my community also consider it. And now when I'm looking at the bigger picture of it, it just really can have a phenomenal impact on bridging that gap between, what we do in our daily lives and our access to medical care about preventive brain health. It's just amazing. So I would love to know, what's next for Better Brain? What are you excited about? What are you working on?
Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty ambitious agenda, right? Like we are trying to build a system that impacts tens of millions of people in the US and eventually globally on brain health. And again, actually it doesn't have to be just us. We just think this System needs to change, and people need to be more aware of this. Most people still don't know that dementia is preventable. We actually want more competitors in the space so that we can. The biggest challenge is actually people don't know it's preventable. People don't know there's something you can do, and so we want more people working on this problem. And we're planning to not. We're not going to stop until we. Our mission is to make dementia an orphan disease. It's just and we think there's a lot of exciting things around just again using the existing science and how do we get that out to tens of millions of people. But then also, I think there's going to be improvements in the science over the coming decades, particularly with the progress in AI. And I'm very excited about how that will help uncover new therapies and methods of prevention. And I'm actually quite optimistic. Like, I'm now 30. I think by the time, even for my parents who are now in their 60s, I think by the time, in 10, 20 years, we're just going to have such a sharper approach to doing this. And I think the chances that we all get dementia is just going to be such dramatically lower as we continue to learn, as we continue to implement this stuff.
I love that vision of it. Right now, the most conservative statistic is that 45% of all cases of dementia are preventable. Most of us in the brain health world think that number is probably closer to 80%, maybe 90%, right? There's always going to be like early onset Alzheimer's that, we just still don't know what to do about, but that's less than 1% of all cases. And so most of this dementia is preventable. It's largely preventable. It's largely lifestyle. It's paying attention to all these details, like the big picture and the little details. Yeah. So all of you who are listening, you probably now are starting to appreciate why I'm so enthusiastic about BetterBrain, and Cedric's whole vision of the future of, making dementia an orphan disease. And I would also add, thank you for being a sponsor of this podcast.
Oh yeah, we are very very proud to be a sponsor. We've been following your content for a long time, and it's so fantastic. We point so many people in your direction. We want everyone to listen to your stuff and go to your retreats. So it was an honor.
Oh, thanks. So you can see now why I'm so proudly sponsored by BetterBrain, and I just want everyone to have access to this technology and just kind of be part of this vision moving forward. It's also the whole attitude of, putting the science to work for you personally, really resonates. And I don't know, I've just been impressed from day one, and it just gets better and better. And I'm just so happy to see, how far you've come. And so, yeah, anything else we need to talk about, Cedric?
No, I mean, yeah, again, thank you for what you do and for honestly for taking a bet on us early. Like you were, again, 2 years ago, we are just getting started. We were like two people in a garage and you signed up as a client and I was your coach and everything was probably breaking at that point. And you still, went out and talked about what we do and we're just really grateful for that. And yeah, we're certainly come a long way since 2 years ago.
Well, I think I'm one person who like acutely saw the need. I don't know if most people know this, but I have a small consultation practice where I see people for brain health consults. And so I was doing on a micro level, what you figured out how to do in, this amazing system with all this support and experts and brain health coaches. And so I was like, I was thinking everyone who comes into me for a consult, they need to sign up for Better Brain, right? And so I was thinking about how these one-on-one consults are great, and I'm happy to do them for people that want to talk to me. But, this system is sort of how you make it happen. This is the next step. It's not just a one-time consult. It's really like getting folded into the system that gets updated with new science as it evolves. So, yeah, absolutely thrilled. Thanks for all your work on this, and I can't wait to hear more in the future.
Amazing. It's great to chat.
All right. Thanks, Cedric. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Eddie.
And now it's time for Annie and Jenny's Review and Do. I'm joined by my co host and producer, Jenny Schilling. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Annie.
So, Jenny, what did you take away from my conversation with Cedric?
The biggest thing I took away is that a lot of people want to be proactive about brain health, but they don't know where to begin. And our healthcare system is not really built for prevention, especially when it comes to the brain. People may be worried that they have a family history of Alzheimer's or dementia, or because they're starting to think about their own long-term brain health. But then they run into all these questions. What should I test? What do my numbers mean? Should I know my ApoE4 status? And what do I actually do with that information once I have it?
Yes, and that what do I do next piece is so important. Testing can be helpful, but testing alone is not the answer.
Exactly. One thing I really appreciated is that Cedric kept coming back to action. Information is only useful if it leads to a plan. So, whether we are talking about sleep, nutrition, exercise, cholesterol, inflammation, stress, or supplements, the question becomes what is the next step that actually fits into my life? I also learned that genetic testing is not simple emotionally. Knowing your ApoE4 status may help some people feel more motivated and more informed, but it is a personal decision. Not everyone wants to know, and people should think carefully about how that information might affect them.
Yes, ApoE4 is a risk factor, not a diagnosis. It can guide decisions, but it does not determine your future.
And then there are biomarkers. I thought the homocysteine discussion was really interesting because it's not something many people routinely check, but it can be connected to a B vitamin deficiency. And that, of course, affects brain health. That feels like one of the places where a blood test can actually reveal something you can do.
Right. And homocysteine is one of those markers that can open up a very practical conversation.
I also like the comparison to preventative cardiology. We're used to thinking about checking your cholesterol and blood pressure to prevent heart disease, but we're still pretty early in thinking that way about dementia and brain health. This episode made me think that brain health is moving in that direction with earlier testing, better interpretation, and then more support before people are actually sick.
Yeah, that would be a huge shift.
And finally, I appreciated the reassurance around cognitive testing. I think a lot of people are afraid of taking any kind of cognitive tests because they worry it will feel like a pass fail exam. But Cedric explained that in a preventative setting, it's often more about tracking patterns over time than judging one particular score.
Yes, that's exactly right. A single test is just one piece of a much bigger picture.
So, Annie, so much good information in your conversation with Cedric. What would you have us do with all this information?
First, if you want to be proactive about your brain health, know that there's a system in place for getting a full evaluation that is backed by all the latest science. Second, if it feels overwhelming to think about all the testing, think about one brain health number you may not know yet. That could be homocysteine, ApoB, LP little a, vitamin B12, folate, fasting glucose, or another marker you heard us talk about. Third, if you're considering ApoE4 genetic testing, do not rush. Think about whether knowing would help you take action or whether it would create more anxiety than clarity. This is a conversation worth having with a knowledgeable clinician, genetic counselor, or brain health professional. Fourth, look at your latest labs through a brain health lens. Many of us have blood work sitting in a portal somewhere, but we may not know what it means for our brain. Fifth, choose one thing to follow through on: better sleep, more movement, more omega 3 rich foods, less alcohol, a supplement you have been advised to take, a follow up lab. The power is not just in knowing, it is in acting. Lastly, remember that prevention is not about perfection. It is about finding the next useful step and making it easier to repeat.
I love that. Brain health can feel overwhelming, but it becomes much more manageable when you have a partner helping along the way.
Yes, and I love the system that BetterBrain has put together for not just initial thorough brain health evaluation, but also follow up
Yeah.
for as long as you want to be in the system.
Yeah. I just had one of my Better Brain follow ups yesterday.
How did it
And
go?
yeah, it's great. I mean, we're working on a couple particular things, and my Better Brain coach is great about just cheering me on to do the improvements that she and I had planned for me.
Yes, I just had my Better Brain coaching session a couple weeks ago too. And like you, it was just really nice to kind of reinforce all the actions I'd put into place early in the year. And I've seen some improvement in my biomarkers, like my homocysteine and my folate level, which is just really gratifying knowing that my brain health is going in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Cedric, I'm so glad he's chosen this as a career. He's really making a difference in the world.
Yeah, the upside, the potential to reach as many people as possible is huge. And I love how
Yeah.
mission driven he is. So, all right. Thanks, Jenny. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll share it with someone you love. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Before you go, I want to mention that my Brain Health Kitchen course, Foundation 2, is launching on Monday, July 13th. I'm really excited to tell you that I've also launched a scholarship program, which means that I'll be giving away one entire course to someone who wants to take the course, but it's not just in the budget right now. Head over to my Substack at brainhealthkitchen.substack.com for more information. And for Brain Health Kitchen subscribers, don't miss your bonus materials that go in the post that goes with this podcast. I am grateful to our founding sponsor, BetterBrain, because their work is helping make brain health more personal and actionable. So much brain health advice can feel broad. Eat better, exercise, sleep, manage stress, know your numbers. All of that matters, but people also need help understanding what their own brain health picture looks like and where to begin. BetterBrain provides a science-backed brain health lab panel and expert coaching to help you identify your own risk factors and turn them into a personalized action plan. Most people pay $0 out of pocket for these sessions. Go to betterbrain.com/Annie to build your personalized brain health action plan, covered by insurance. I'd also like to thank NeuroReserve for being a founding sponsor of this podcast. NeuroReserve is doing important work in brain health nutrition by creating high-quality, science-backed products that help people get nutrients associated with cognitive health. Their products include Relevate, a brain-specific omega-3 blend, Brain Health Kitchen extra virgin olive oil, and Revanta creatine. I've known the NeuroReserve team for many years, and I use their products as part of my own brain health care routine. Go to neuroreserve.com and use BHK Podcast for 10% off. The Brain Health Kitchen podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The content shared on this podcast, including conversations with guests, is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Brain Health Kitchen podcast or its hosts.